Imagine what it looked like as the water was pouring down and the erosion was happening, and it was just, and the people walking down there. So you really targeted an obviously really important spot to improve. And I've got to say, I've never been to Beechwood Park, and hearing some of the history from Paul was really kind of, I had no idea. This was an African American park where there was all kinds of entertainment stuff, and people were baptized here, and this history, and the Anne Arundel County owned it, but kind of sat on it. Sorry. Finally, it's time to do some stuff with it. So I look forward to doing more. I'm glad there's a kayak launch. We've got to get the people out here and open up places like this so that the public enjoys it.
This is Paul Spadaro. I'm going to tell you about Muddy Branch. Muddy Branch is a tributary of the Upper Magathie in Pasadena. It is perhaps the coldest water temperature in the entire Magathie River watershed. It is known by its crystal clear water. It had some erosion problems this spring, but Anne Arundel Community College, they're going to come back and seed this with wild celery, and this will really help maintain its water quality. And this cold water is so important for the yellow perch spawn in the spring to maintain this quality.
Built by a boat builder who had been building during the early 1900s in the style that was like the workboats that had been built to dredge oysters in the Chesapeake Bay, specifically over on the eastern shore in the Choptank River. It doesn't have a lot of the modern gear that a fiberglass sailboat has. It has no winches. They would not have had winches on a skipjack. It has a different kind of rigging. It has, instead of turnbuckles, it has lanyards and dead eyes. So it looks very much like a 19th century boat. The attractiveness of that to me was that it was not a typical fiberglass boat that's fairly ubiquitous. It was a vernacular vessel It was built like the vernacular vessels that were used as workboats in the Chesapeake Bay. And as a two-masted vessel, it also had an attraction in that it was a lower aspect rig, which presented different sail combinations than we normally see on a modern fiberglass sloop, which have been a continual source of interest and experimentation. We can sail with just the mainsail and the jib, that it's different from the boats that I sailed on here in the Bay, raced on during the 80s and 90s. It's an icon of the Chesapeake Bay. It's a historic precursor of the state boat, the skipjack. It has a lot of the representations of the boats that have the traditional appeal that a lot of people associate with the Chesapeake Bay. It has raked masts. It has carved trail boards, gilded. It has stern boards that are carved. It has a long head that has the long sweep in front of the overhanging bowsprit. So it has a lot of interesting looking features. It has a lot of juice. And we have a full cabin, so we're bending the rule there a little bit, but it still has a workboat aesthetic. It does not look like a passenger vessel. When you go onto the Jolly Dolphin, the aroma that comes from down below is striking. There's a smell of cedar and wood that is really quite enriching. It's not the most efficient of boats, but because it has a centerboard, we can go into the very shallow creeks and all that, as we were talking before about the boats that would go in and out of the various landings on the bay, certainly Robinson's here in the Magathie River area. So that evolution of the boat to suit the conditions, the geography, is something that is, I think, being lost. When we see typical aluminum-masted sloop that could be in San Francisco, it could be in the Magathie River, it could be in New England, there's a certain sameness to all of that. So preserving something that is specific to the bay, the Magathie, all the little creeks and inlets in the estuary is really what captured me.
Okay, I'm going to switch the engine off. When I think about Patches, it's more of a story about myself than the actual boat. I've had it since 1978 and done a number of restorations and gone through a number of different phases in my entire life. It's more about myself. It's more about the persistence that I have and trying to maintain something, keep something. No matter whatever happened, I was always able to do some work on the boat, keep it running, and it sort of mirrors my life. Things always don't exactly go in the right way, and some years, even with Patches, the engine didn't work, and I just painted it and maintained it, and eventually put a new engine in it, or a new older engine in it. And these are the things that really define who I am, and I never thought it as that. I never really thought it as a people always say is a project of love. I don't think so. Many times I've been all over this boat, many different times, and many times we've gone through many divorces on this boat where I really could care less. It would just burn. But it always patched it back together again, and always did the best I could. And yet I still always had the presence of mind to keep it original. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I realized, because I had the boat so long, that it's really unique. It's a unique story in itself. Thinking about Patches today, she's almost 92 years old, but she still has the curves of a young lady.
I bought Emily Ann. We finalized the deal in April of 2021. I knew the boat very well before I bought it. Around 2001, 2002, Timmy hauled Emily Ann out in Curtis Bay. That is where Emily Ann got her second shot at life. So yeah, and then, when she, the deconstruction, the reverse construction of her, she was taken apart. I realized and I recognize and am very grateful for this this vessel that is like one of a kind, and I get to go out on it and I get to experience 1940 built in Baltimore, and like I got the keys to it, like the inside of the pilot house, the cabin. He did send her to Tillman Island. Emily Ann comes from a group of boats, 3 of them, that was named the Mosquito Fleet. Emily Ann has a brother and a sister, Mary Bell and Tiny 2. I believe that Tiny 2 was a hair smaller. Mary Bell was an equivalent match to Emily Ann. I know that Emily Ann pushed chemical barges around in the Inner Harbor starting in 1940. Mary Bell, Emily Ann's sister, back in the 70s, I believe, was actually purchased by the town of Cambridge. And Cambridge used her for, all sorts of just different things. The town of Cambridge did not opt to gut and start over and rebuild. And so they just tore her apart and recycled it and got rid of her. Same thing happened. I would have to do some research to see where Tiny 2 ended up, but I do know that Tiny 2 was also retired, which makes Emily Ann the only remaining vessel from the Mosquito Fleet. I mean, I don't know if it'll ever wear off the fact it's like Christmas every day.
Today, a new home construction site in Berrywood was the source of major sediment runoff that went directly into Cattail Creek. In the last 3 days, the developer has clear-cut the property of trees. The lot had been heavily wooded and was identified as a heron rookery in the past few years. In the photo above, you can see that there is no silt fence in the front of the property. Clearly, the sediment has run off from the construction site. It's running down the street from Weeble Court onto Stonehouse Drive and then into the stormwater drainage system that will lead from there to Marina 2. The plume then enters the water at Marina 2, where you can see that it is a chocolate brown. The silt then migrates, flows down the marina into Cattail Creek. The $1 million Berrywood restoration site is just up the creek from Marina 2. And the creek has been dredged.
Hello, my name is Paul Spadaro. I'm president of the Magathie River Association. On October 28th, the Magathie River Association deployed 12 specially produced reef balls at Dobbins Island. These reef balls were made by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation with oyster spat set on them. We hope to improve not only the fish habitat with this particular type of reef ball, but also improve the water quality. In the future, the Magathie River Association will deploy more of these reef balls at Dobbins Island.